Van Eyck portrait of Arnolfini and his bride. We were looking at the way in which Van Eyck uses, in whether it's religious pictures or portraits, uses a wealth of very small details to build the meaning within his work. And this is very different than the Italian approach, which really focuses on a rebirth of humanism through looking at ancient Roman art, right? Van Eyck loves talking in almost microscopic details, painted with a very, very tiny brush. And so when we looked at the annotation, we saw everything inside sort of build up this meaning about what it meant to Christians for the coming of Christ. And in the same way, the Arnolfini with his wife, the various elements that we saw here, whether it's the oranges, the puppy got chewed, the dusters, the sculptures, the chandelier, all of these things add to the meaning, right? They tell something about him, they tell something about her, they tell something about them together as a couple, right? And the one detail we left off is at the very back of the room, right next to that set of amber prayer beads, which are usually given as a gift from husband to wife. I guess it's meant to keep them home and out of trouble. So it's this beautiful mirror, right? And with little enamel scenes of the crucifixion at the top, you can see there are actually religious scenes around the outside of the mirror. Probably so that when you look at your reflection in the mirror, you would think about salvation, right? No mirror looking exactly like this has ever been recovered. We don't know if that I saw something real or just kind of made it up. I don't like the idea that you sort of made it up. But in the mirror, we see Arnolfini and his wife from the back, right? It's a convex mirror, like up cap, right? So it bends and distorts what it reflects. And directly above it, written in this rather fancy script, is Van Eyck's signature as it goes on the wall. You'll find it to Eyck, Jan Van Eyck, who was here. Not painted this, which is the normal way of painting, but he was here. And the date, 1434. Now, sometimes when Van Eyck puts a date on his canvases, there'll be something on the frame, the original frame, that would actually give us the exact date as well. This one doesn't, because it's missing the original frame. So they may have had more information for us about when it was done. Van Eyck was here. Not Van Eyck painted it, but Van Eyck was here. Now, he would have been there when he painted it, right? That's kind of part of it. But also there's this idea that what Van Eyck is doing is creating a world that is as real as our world. That as we look at the picture, and he does this again and again, there's the sense that he knows that they're so realistic looking that our world and this world are the same. It's one, right? That the hard wooden panel with paint on it, you're looking at, disappears, and you start to think about the fact that, and even here, the light from our face, right? The light is coming from this room. Okay, it's dark. But the light is casting a shadow back, right? The dog casts a shadow back that way, not from this window, right? They're lit from here. They're not lit from that window. And that becomes even more obvious in other works from Van Eyck, where the frame actually casts a shadow into the room. He's really aware of how realistic these things are. And by saying, I was here, right, it's sort of like saying, hey, you're here too, right? We are there. It's not looking at a picture, but we're inhabiting their space. And with this in mind, there's this, we're going to dive in even closer, right, to the mirror. And, you know, each one of these came from a different digital scan, so the colors kind of morph a bit, right? But as you look more closely, you can see, interesting in this document. But there's Arnolfini with that great hat. There's the wife, right? There's the dead, seen it from the back. Oranges on the counter. We're looking out now into the garden in the other direction, aren't we? We're looking out this way in the garden. So the mirror lets us see things that the painting doesn't. Right? And as we look past Arnolfini and his wife, there are two figures there standing there. Have just come in. Right? One in blue with a sort of fancy turban-like hat, called a chaperon. And one is red as well. And again, I have a detail, I think, of them coming up so we can see it even closer. Right? Two figures standing there looking at them. If we couple this with the signatures that Van Eyck was here, the question is, look at one of these guys dying. Right? Not Van Eyck painted, just Van Eyck was here. And they're both dressed like court figures, in other words, members of nobility. And then I was a court painter. He was the servant of the full, the good, the true free. Right? So is there a chance that one of these guys is meant to be Van Eyck? And what's really fascinating is that there is a portrait that we're pretty sure is a South portrait of Van Eyck. Here's our inscription on the frame. Johannes de Eyck made this 1433 on the 21st of October as up to the best of my ability. I'll take care as I can, right? To the best of my ability. And usually the frame will identify the center of this one. It's not, and he signs other pictures with that model. I'll take care to the best of my ability. In a red turban, which were kind of stylish at the time, right? This is maybe back here with a red turban as well. And we look in the background of other banners, we find a little guy in a red turban working around that. Right? He is in the pictures, and he's in this one as well. Right? So again, these details that we've been looking at add up to a couple of different conclusions. One, Van Eyck is including them in order to amplify meaning, right? In order to give the picture more nuanced meaning, a deeper, broader, more encyclopedic kind of inclusion of ideas, right? But on the other hand, and going really perfectly parallel with that, Van Eyck paints these details because he knows he's so darn good. He's such a good painter, right? He can create a reality that makes us think that is part of our reality, right? And he knows this. He can create a reality that he himself could inhabit, that becomes part of the space that we live in. And I think that's what makes Van Eyck, to this day, one of the most exciting painters really that ever lived. And remember that he's credited with having invented oil paint, which is how he's achieving all of these effects. Now that said, he is not the only artist who does sort of tight, sharp, tiny details. Right? That's actually the norm for art from Flanders, from Northern Europe. And we saw it already with the Limburg brothers. We saw it in sculpture with Klaus Schluter as well. Right? Van Eyck's not alone in doing it. He's also not alone in painting with oils. Right? Beginning with the late 1420s, 1430s, we start to see all of the artists in this region really mastering the use of oil paint. Right? So here's Roger van der Weyden, an image showing Christ having been lowered from the cross into the arms of his followers. Takes place immediately after the crucifixion and before the burial. Okay? And you see there's a figure up above coming down from the ladder. I got some details to show you here. So he's not the only one. I got to figure out where I am coming up next. The next slide coming up doesn't look like I want it, but I want it. I guess it is. Roger van der Weyden came from the city of Brussels. You know, you heard about Brussels. It's the Washington, D.C. of the EU. And it's sort of about, you know, Van Eyck was in Bruges, so it's about take a train from Bruges to Brussels today, it's about an hour. Right? So it's about a day's ride back in the day. This work shows St. Luke making art. From the Middle Ages on, St. Luke was believed to have been an artist, so the writer of the Gospel of St. Luke was also a painter in medieval mythology. There's no proof for it. But we think that Van Eyck painted this picture as his masterpiece. That term comes from the idea that you had to prove you were good to join an artist's guild. We talked about a wool merchant's guild. We talked about a linen draper's guild. The artists had a guild as well. And you had to, in order to join the guild, prove that you had learned what you needed to know. Roger van der Weyden, we think, gave this painting of the patron saint of artists to the Brussels Guild when he joined in 1432, 1435, right around there. And he, too, in both of these pictures, has the same sense of microscopic detail, right? I wanted to show you two details from this because they're kind of fun. There he's drawing with a little brush in the grading, and he's drawing the face of the Virgin, right? This is up in Boston, if you want to go see it, right? This is up 95, a little ways.
more than just a little ways. And that's the thing people usually focus on, is this idea that he's drawing her from life. But one of the things that really intrigued me about this, and I've been working on a paper about it, did you notice this city in the background? Just like kind of like the one we saw with Van Eyck a second ago when we looked at that website. All these people sort of milling around back there, including the figures looking off and pointing sort of over to the city. Look at this, this is so cool. Like back here, it's like this guy riding over here on a horse, maybe leading into this. I don't know if they're selling brass wares. Some people think it might be an apothecary, airing laundry out the window, and people standing in the doorway here. People moving everyone with this jug. She just threw away water into the river, right? She wouldn't ever bring water out of the river in the city. It would be too dirty. This guy. What's he doing? Guys, he's peeing in the corner, right? And this is the world outside that kind of goes on, Right? And this gets hit. Right? In the background. And they just sort of out of way of everybody, and, she's probably going, yeah. But she's just got, she's just thrown away her waist out there anyway, so she's probably not looking twice. And this guy goes up like, and he said, where did you go? Down by the river probably is sanitary places anyway, because the water's in the flush. Well, let's just say a couple of urinals in the 15th century. I tried to do some research on that. Anyway, I thought that's a fun little detail to pull out there. And you'll never look at this picture and not go look for him, right? The pissing man in the background. But again, this sense of tiny detail, right? Not always used for totally religious elements. Sometimes used just for mundane details of everyday life. So like I said, he's in Brussels. Now, the map that's in your textbook often doesn't have Brussels on it. It's about between Ghent and Leuven, so where this arrow is. This is where Roger van der Weyden spent his career, whereas Van Eyck spent his in Bruges. Okay, same region. They met each other a couple times, right? We know for a fact that they met each other a couple times, and but roughly the same region, even though not in exactly the same city. Van der Weyden's work, Roger's work, was made for a guild, a militia guild, the army, if you will, of the city of Leuven, which is just outside of Brussels. The train between Brussels and Leuven takes about 12 minutes, right? It's very, very close. You can walk it without trying. So he's working for a nearby town, and he's working for a group of military men who kept a chapel where they stored their arms in the city of Leuven. In particular, they shot crossbows. If you don't know what a crossbow is, well, there's one in the corner of the tracery that he's painted, hanging there, right? It's the bow and arrow that you shoot like a gun, right? So this is the people for whom Roger van der Weyden is working. He's he sort of, his fame in Brussels brought him the attention of these military men from the town next door, right? And he paints the crossbow into the corner as a reference to them. Roger van der Weyden worked for quite a few different military guilds. I'm sorry, there's supposed to be a title up there, but it didn't show up. This is downtown, the National Gallery. The picture on your right, the figures are roughly life-size, right? The deposition figures, it's massive. It's about 8 feet across the base, right? This one is smaller than the postcard of the picture that they sell. It's 5.5 inches tall, right? So, right, you basically fold your 8.5 by 11.5, and that's right about where you are, right? It's that tall. Like that. Okay? So, it looks bigger on the screen, doesn't it? But again, filled with infinite detail. Now, St. George was the patron saint of archers. And this was done probably for someone who belonged to an archery guild, right, a group of archers. But it wasn't done for that guild. It wasn't done for the same people that the deposition was done for, because their patron saint was the Virgin Mary. And the picture focuses on the Virgin Mary. Here she is in the middle. She's fainted. That's because the crossbowmen of Leuven had as a patron saint not just the Virgin Mary, but they worshipped the Virgin of Sorrows, the sad Virgin Mary. In medieval and Renaissance devotions, Mary had 7 moments in her life that caused her incredible grief. And this is probably the worst of them. She has to deal with the fact that her son has been tortured to death. We talked about that with Giotto, didn't we? The idea of what it would be like for a mother to have to think about outliving her son, right? And in the case of the Virgin Mary, she had to watch him get tortured to death, right? And in this case, she is now fainted from the pain. So this is their patron saint. She's the focus of the image. Even though it's called the deposition, the focus is on her reaction to the scene. She is their patron saint. So the moment is when Christ has been lowered from the cross. The fellow on the ladder with the very kind of puffy, hangover eyes sort of feature is probably not meant to be a good guy. He's the only one that actually touches the flesh of Christ. Everybody else is pretty careful not to. Right? So that makes me think he's not a follower so much. It's just somebody's there to lower Christ from the cross. The bloody nails are in his hand. He's pulled them out. After the crucifixion, he's now dropped Christ to the ground to be taken by his followers, who will then tend the body and give him the burial that they want him to have. You'll notice that Roger van der Weyden does not attempt to show us landscape, right? It looks like it's in a box. You get a little bit of ground down below. You have a skull because this is Golgotha, the place of the skull. It was a graveyard by legend where Christ was crucified. There's the bones down there as well. It was also believed to be the burial site of Adam. We talked about this, didn't we? Did you see a skull with that crucifixion from the National Gallery? Okay, I'm misremembering. So the skull down here can be a reference to Adam, death, and Christ eventually resurrecting not only himself, but through his sacrifice helping all of us to eternal life as well. Since the theme is the sorrowful Virgin Mary, one of the things that Roger van der Weyden wants to do is to focus on sorrow. And he wants you, the viewer, to focus on sadness. Have an emotional reaction to the work. And this is something that sets Roger apart from Johan van Eyck. Van Eyck includes details that add to sort of symbolic meaning. Roger van der Weyden tends to include details that help to add to a sort of an emotional impact. He does this on more than one occasion. So let's look at some details of this. And again, I've got to get some of these slides a bit better. But there's the dead head of Christ. The blood is dried on his head, so it's sent to the side, but it's still there. And as we look at the 3 figures here, think that is Joseph of Arimathea in the red hat. One of the Marys, Mary Salome in the green, and John the Evangelist in red. And each one of them reacts differently to the death of Christ, but none of them anything but sad. It's a symphony of sad. And it really is, and I'll turn off, this is a much better slide. It gives you a sense of perhaps there's something, how do you react to sadness? Not everybody weeps and wails and, thrashes about. Some people are kind of quiet and stoic about it. And it seems as if Roger van der Weyden is including a exemplar for each one of us. So Joseph of Arimathea, you can see, he's got the red in his hair on the inside. He's got the Visine eyes, doesn't he? The red cornea, but you can also see that he's really captured right here and right here. The tears are coming, aren't they? They're just welling up, and they're about to spill over the bottom lid. And you caught that moment, right? But again, like Van Eyck, he's interested in details and using them for emotional impact. Mary Salome is further down the road, right? The tears have come out of her eyes. And again, look at she's been rubbing her eyelids. They're red from her sadness, and the tears are dripping down her cheeks, right, and spilling out of her eyes. So she's a step further. It's not as easy as that. It doesn't just move from one to the next to the next. But each figure reacts in a different mode of sadness, right? John the Evangelist, again, also with very, very red eyes, tears streaming down his cheeks as he catches the Virgin Mary, and Mary Salome catches the Virgin Mary as she faints dead away. On the opposite side, we have Nicodemus crying even more still. Right? Roger's focusing on these very, very different reactions. Also notice, I love the stubble, right? Just these other cute little details of the wisps of hair underneath his chin, right? And how well he's captured the three-dimensional quality of the different planes of the man's face. Who is this on the far right, do you suppose, in the red sleeves with her hands wound up? Mary Magdalene. How do you know? Excellent. Good. So there's a portion of the Bible where a woman washes the feet of Christ, and by legend, right, that became known usually in people's minds as Mary Magdalene, right? And she's at the feet of Christ again, right? And so the placement helps to tie in to identify her as Mary Magdalene. Again, notice the wounds and the blood. There's a bit of gore in this. We'll see more in other works than this, right? Is there anything else that tells us it's Mary Magdalene? What did Mary Magdalene do before she was a follower of Christ? Does anybody know what her occupation was? No? So, sorry? Harlot, exactly. She's a prostitute. The world's oldest occupation, right? Notice that she's the only of the four women here that's got cleavage, right? It becomes a symbol of her past. Also, the costume with the red sleeves was associated with prostitution in the 15th century. So these things help to identify her as Mary Magdalene. A nice detail that I've only recently seen is that her belt has the name of Jesus and Mary on it, right? Her name, Maria, Mary Magdalene, and Jesus are together on that belt to show her devotion to him, right? Jesus and Maria, right? So, and she's reacting in also a very, very different way. Still tears streaming down her cheeks and off her nose. But the focus remains the reaction of the Virgin Mary, who has been crying. You can see it drip off her cheek and all the way down on her chin. But she is now simply fainted dead away. All the blood is drained from her face. She is as white as the veil that she wears around her head. And she's the focus because all the other things sort of add up to thinking about how she's feeling. Because remember that the crossbowmen of Leuven were dedicated to Our Lady of Sorrows, the Virgin of Sorrows. With the idea that she has fainted, just as Christ died, you'll notice if you look at the painting that Roger van der Wijn has come up with a really fantastic compositional tie-in here. This was not easy to do with Photoshop, but you get the idea, right? Their poses are almost exactly the same. So as Christ is lowered from the cross, the Virgin has sympathetically fallen into the same pose. And as he dies, she sleeps. She has a little death of her own, right? She faints. And we can find theologians writing in the 15th century and before about the fact that it was the Virgin Mary's compassion for Christ that is a part of our salvation. That he suffered the passion, right, the torture and death, and she suffered from her compassion. That the two are intrinsically linked. And Roger van der Wijn visually does that. He puts them into the same position. I went to a conference a couple of years ago in Belgium on Roger van der Wijn. I wrote an article in his painting a number of years back. But one of the things that this conference brought out that I've never seen before, because I was just focused on the, this, right, as being exactly the same. But somebody mentioned that the whole cross, right? There's
Moses into a little bit more still, right? A way of adding to something that would have helped the crossbowmen in their own devotions. And finally, then the focus comes down to this, right? These two hands as they fall together, that literally fall immediately adjacent to each other. Her very pale hand next to his bloody, wounded hand, right? That's the connection here. Our Virgin of Sorrows suffering because she's had to watch her son. So using the same sort of detail that Van Eyck did, but for very, very different purposes. And this is the mode of 15th century painting in Flanders, right, in the Low Countries, is this interest in using oil paint to achieve details that the more you scrutinize, the more you see. And it sets it apart from many works, at least in the first half of the 15th century in Italy. Right. Now we're done a bit early. We're basically done with 15th century Northern. We'll be moving into chapter 9 next. There are, like I said, two currently. There will be a third online art fix that will help us to get a little bit closer to caught up here. So between now and Thursday, right, we've got some work to do on your bibliography. Some of you more than others, perhaps. I can help if you let me, but you have to sort of email me and set up a time to do it. And I'll be happy to sort of give you some input. Okay. It's on your art.
I know.
Okay, not on my art.
I know.
Okay.
But only my art.
Yeah, and your artist is again, Leonardo da Vinci.
Yes.
Right?
And this one, what kind of
I would do Italian Renaissance. Right? Italian Renaissance art.
okay.
There's books on Italy, books on 16th century Italy. He was active primarily in Florence, so you might look for that. Or you might use the word, there was no science.
Okay.
But certainly the term Renaissance, right? An Italian Renaissance in particular. So that you don't get stuff on the German.
Okay. And this one idea is that paint, right?
The period and region that the artist and the painting keep. Okay? Want me to send it to you again? Yeah? That's weird. Okay, very good. Let me just send it to you right now so I don't forget. Do me a favor. Turn on the news number as yet. Oh, very good. Okay, great. Go to. And did you get? There were two things I sent you. Union Board. There should be two attachments. One was the bibliography with comments, and there was also a grading rubric that had comments on it too. Special orders. Very good. Oh, hey, we're still doing